Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/usingyourpower. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And I'd like to recommend Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within, an essential personal development book for every reader. Welcome to Using Your Power. I'm David Andrew Wiebe, and joining me is
Maveen, Kaura.
Hey, Maveen, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How are you today?
I'm powered up.
Are you? Me too, man. I got a good day and a good start today. I went to a chiropractor, got myself adjusted, went and bought about $30 worth of just fresh fruit and vegetables.
Yep.
So I'm going to start my cleanse tomorrow. I think I was telling you that right before we started. And got a massage, so I'm super relaxed, but now I got all this extra energy since we started recording. And I'm ready to do our talk. How's your day been?
Yeah, well, I guess it's off to kind of a slow start, but, I'm still dealing with computer troubles. And, I've got a big week ahead, too, so I got to be planning and figuring out what I need to get done by when so that I can still play the show out of town on Thursday and meet all of my other commitments as well. But it's an exciting week.
Nice. Well, it looks like you're going to have a couple of sleepless nights ahead of you.
Maybe not that bad, but yeah, we'll see.
Awesome. So what's our talk today?
We're going to take a look at Tony Robbins' movie, I'm Not Your Guru.
Right.
And you might have watched it on Netflix. And if you haven't, I think it's something everybody should have a look at. It's quite compelling. Maybe even more interesting than you'd be inclined to believe. We all know where kind of Tony Robbins started, or when he began to come into prominence. One of the, people kind of knew him as the motivation prep rally, get hyped up kind of guy. But, he has matured as a speaker, as an author, as somebody that's in the self-help or personal development field. And I think, these days more than ever, he's channeling the part of him that is the psychologist, because he's studied psychology quite extensively. And I think I'm Not Your Guru actually sums up that point quite nicely. He's basically saying, like, look, I'm not, this motivation dude. He's kind of coming out and saying, I specialize in an area of motivation, inspiration, personal development, self-help, and that kind of stuff. But I'm not the guy to look to, in a way.
No, it's true. And, a lot of people go to his different events, throughout the 80s, from the 80s, 90s till now.
Yeah.
And, he's helped lots and lots of people all around the world. Puts on, I forgot how many events he does a year, but he's put on tons of different events, some in the States, some overseas as well. And, and just takes everything he's learned, and like you said, things that he's probably applied to himself as well, not just, feeding people garbage, right? He's really applied a lot of this information to himself. You can watch the video. You'll see a lot of the breathing techniques he uses, a lot of the way he increases his own energy as well, right? So a lot of different things that he's learned over the years that he's really teaching people as well.
That's true. And of anybody, he has a pretty busy schedule. He's not one to shy away from sharing that with people. I think I heard him talk about that on Tim Ferriss' show. So, he's one of those people. We also know, like, entrepreneurs and other people who are saying, like, stop living these crazy lives and working these crazy days. But Tony Robbins is one of those guys that definitely openly lives that kind of life. And I think it really, you get on that high of helping so many people that he can't stop helping people. He wants to do that. It's just a huge passion of his, and that's like a huge motivator.
Right. Even in the movie, he, the gentleman that was doing the documentary asked him, what pushes you? And he just literally says it's an addiction he has now.
Yeah.
He really seriously can't stop helping people, which, it's a great addiction to have if you're going to have any sort of addiction, right? Is really helping people get through their day-to-day problems so they can actually go and live the life that, they really want to live.
Exactly. I don't know this for sure, but I think if I'm not mistaken, like right now, this is a Netflix exclusive. You might be able to see it elsewhere, but at the moment, you may only be able to see it on Netflix. So just wanted to make that point in case you can't find it anywhere else.
Right. I think there's it was released on Netflix. I think it was back in July 2016 here, so not too long ago. The event that's taking place on the video, I believe it took place in 2014, if I remember correctly. So it is a couple of years old. The event itself. I mean,
The Day of Destiny, but he does those like every year.
he does those once a year, and he does do them in the Florida, where the state that he lives in, or might have one of his homes in. But he does it in Boca Raton, right? It's a 6-day event that he puts on, and people from all around the world come in, and just watching the video, you'll really get to see how extensive it is, because he's catering to all different people from all around the world. If they don't speak English or understand English, he has translators in place to help people as well, right? So I mean, it's almost like the meeting of the UN when you're watching this video.
So why are we discussing this? What's its importance? Why would we want to discuss I Am Not Your Guru here on Using Your Power?
One fantastic question. One of the big things that I took away, I watched that video 2 times actually, back to back within a day of each other. And the reason was, when me and you actually told me about it, I'm not sure if you had actually watched it at the time or not.
I'm pretty sure I had, yeah.
Yeah, so when I watched it myself and I think about it, and it really awoke me to a new way of thinking, and a new way of really looking at my own life and where I want to take my own life, with myself not currently employed, just really wanting to figure out what I want to do, what is my next destiny step, right? Really. So looking at that video and then actually watching that video with my wife, Lynn, that was huge as well, because I asked her, I was like, hey, you know what? I really want to watch this with you. I think it's a life changer. It's a game changer watching it, right? Because I don't have $5,000 US to go to the event right now in Boca Raton, plus spend money on hotels and food and whatnot right now, right? So watching that video, of a pretty condensed 6 days into about a 2-hour video, I mean, there's a lot of information that he goes through, which I thought was so impactful.
That's a good point, because that's one of the things that you'll probably take away from watching this, is Tony Robbins is kind of getting to the bottom of your problem, like what exactly is hindering you from becoming everything that you could be, or doing the things that you want to do, very simply. So with a lot of people that he's trying to talk to or intervene with, he's trying to get them to the point where they understand, like, well, he's also trying to understand what their motivation is and what the heck's getting in the way of them accomplishing what they want to do, and building that awareness between himself and the person he's talking to.
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed too was he was very good at getting past the superficial excuses or the superficial things people are looking to really solve problems for. He really dug down. He understood, I think, when watching the video, that the first thing that people brought up was not really the first problem they really had. He really got people to open up. I mean, some of these stories are super emotional when you watch them. I mean, they're just, he really found a way to joke with people, even when they were going through some really extreme situations, right? I mean, he was talking to people who were thinking about committing suicide, and really, one gentleman, he says in the video, is it your shoes? Is that why you're depressed? Is that why you want to kill yourself? He really found a way for the guy to relax a little bit and really open up and really get comfortable with him, so he could really dive in a bit and problem solve.
I think the part where that comment first came up was, there's this girl that he was talking to that he had identified as somebody that needed, some intervention, I guess. And she, in
this one, it was actually at the starting of the video with the gentleman. The girl one was actually even crazier.
Yeah, no, but I think what I'm talking about is, like, the first time he even mentions that he needs to cut through sometimes people's veneer to get through the core of the problem was with this one girl.
That's right.
Who identified her problem as like bad eating habits or something like that. And then it turns out to be, she actually had a deeper issue with her father.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's the conversation that she had. She thought, I want to eat better. And that's what we mean by that superficial conversation that a lot of people are trying to solve problems with, right? I mean, if we all want to eat better, we know what we need to do, right? And he figured out quick that wasn't really the issue. And I mean, her mom was sitting right there, so he probably was able to read the situation a little better as well, better than most people are.
And kind of breaking through, like, what sort of techniques would we use, right? I think the one that Tony Robbins relies on fairly heavily and has for many years is actually just swearing, like appearing as though he's angry, even to kind of shock people out of that state that they're in, that Because I think, how many conversations have you had or I had over the phone with somebody that's like despondent and not listening and not hearing what we're trying to say, and like trying to present some kind of solution, which I guess that's not the first place women like to go. Sometimes they just need somebody to listen to them and to hear them out
sure.
when they have a problem. But you also have people that are completely despondent and not hearing a word of it. So I think what Tony Robbins does to get out of that is to just shock people.
Yeah, and he even made a point of it, right? I don't think he probably swears as much as he does in his conferences.
No,
he might. I don't know, right?
Maybe not in day-to-day life.
No, he might. But, the thing was, too, he said it. It does shock people. It makes people listen, right? It's things that people aren't expecting to hear at a professional, conference where people are being helped and talked to, and someone says the F word or shit or whatever. People are being sworn at, and that really shocks people, opens up their mind, and takes them back, saying, what's going on here, right? Yeah. And they really want to, it makes them want to listen and say, okay, well, this guy must have something huge, because people only typically swear when there's something important to say, I guess, from their perspective.
Yeah. So I think, that's one of those things that's brilliant. And that definitely isn't to say that he doesn't have other techniques. I'm sure he does for getting through to people as well. But that's one of them that I've definitely, noticed over the years with his various conferences and interventions that he's done with attendees at his events.
Right, and one of the things I really liked, there's so many different statements that I liked that he had just in this one event. I know I've never watched any other movie or video that he's ever put out, or really any other conference. Seminars like this. Yeah, conferences. I think this was really a huge groundbreaking one that they did put out. I mean, like I said earlier, right, it's a $5,000 US course or a class that they're putting out. I mean, this is pretty extensive. It's taking people through 13, 14-hour days sometimes, right? I mean, things that wait for that long period of time as well, right? So it allowed people to really, I think, dig deeper into themselves, right? It's like what the purpose of our show is, right? Allowing people to use your power, use your own power to create a better life for yourself, right? So I mean, this movie just made sense for us to talk about as well.
Well, yeah, and that's true. And that's a really interesting point, too, because we could kind of do a callback to network marketing, where you have functions, you have events, you have conferences happening constantly. You might have some small scale ones happening every week, but the big scale ones kind of happen, once every quarter. And so, the thing that often you come away with when you travel, when you go to a place you're not familiar with, when you interact with people you've never seen before, when you're in an entire stadium cheering on some of the speakers together, something happens to you. You're taking notes, going through these exercises, which is kind of like what the Day of Destiny is. Like, you're doing 6 days or something like that, of like intense exercises and conversations and meeting people in groups. And most people probably aren't local, so they're traveling from out of town to do that. It really takes you out of your regular routine and does change you. Sometimes the problem, though, is that it doesn't last.
Well, no, that's true, right? And I think what he does is he really, I mean, they don't really show a lot of it, but they do show parts of it where he's really getting people to work in smaller groups and smaller teams to really set their own goals, to set their agenda. So when they do go back to their regular life, because this 6 days is not real, it's not real life in the big picture, right? It's real life for 6 days. But when you get back to reality, you got to go back to work. You got to go back to your country, whichever country you're coming from, or province or state or whatnot, you're going to go back to your regular routine. Your old friends show up again. Your old colleagues at work show up. They all want to talk about the same things that maybe you don't want to, right? Your exes might show up. This person might show up, right? So all these things are going to continually to bombard you, right? So a lot of this video, in the movie is really talking about dealing with these problems. So when you went back to your real life, that you've done and done the things that you need to do to deal with it, right? So one of the things I remember he did was he actually made a lady call up her current boyfriend at the time and got her because he can't convince her to do it. He taught her, I guess, really on why it made sense to really let that guy go, because she was not only hurting him herself, but she was really in the big picture hurting him, so he couldn't move forward, because she, like he said in the movie, he had no chance with her in the big picture either.
Well, I think it's something many men struggle with, is like taking the relationship to the next level. Is, it's not necessarily, oftentimes it's not the woman that's like relenting about marriage, it's the guy. Having a trouble making that decision, and women more often than not want to get married earlier rather than later. Not that guys are any different in that regard. I think we all want somebody in our lives that we care about and love and that kind of thing. But sometimes there's fear and other things that get in the way of you making that proposal. So yeah, if the relationship doesn't evolve, then what is it?
Right. Well, there's things that he hit on too, right? I mean, you'll remember this. I think this impacted me too, because he asked the girl, he's like, "Oh, or the lady, I guess, not the girl, but he asked her, he's like, well, you're probably daddy's little princess, weren't you?" And she's like, "Yeah, I was daddy's little princess." He's like, "Boy, did he fuck you up." And, people were just so taken back, again, with that swearing part with what he did, right? But it really made people think. It's like he set the standard so high for any guy, that guy can't be with you anymore because you've set the standard for yourself, which you should. You should be treated like a princess, be treated like a queen, but then you don't allow anybody else's standards to ever reach that because you see that standard so high of yourself as well, because of course your dad saw that within yourself, right? So he had a very interesting way to make her understand that, that no guy would ever have a chance with her because her dad had set such a high expectation. And I'm not sure if that comes from the Freudian kind of teaching or not, but you may know a little bit more on that. I'm not sure.
Well, what I wanted to say actually was just this whole thing about perfectionism. And I think it's in the media and the things that we grow up watching as well. You watch something from Disney and so it's the tall, good looking guy. That's the good guy. It's the ugly, dishonest guy. That's the bad guy, which is so different from how life is. Beauty does not equal innocence. Beauty does not equal honesty. Beauty does not equal integrity. None of those things. It's just like, you won the genetic roulette. That's part of it. The other thing is, I guess you care enough about yourself to put that time and effort into being that or appearing that way. But it doesn't necessarily, give any, I guess it maybe does give people advantages in some ways, but I think there's disadvantages too. It's just like anything else. Having lots of money, big advantage, but there can also be lots of downsides if you don't know how to manage it.
Right. Well, look at all the things that people do that they do have a lot of money, right? And they do a lot of bad things with their money. We can see that in the election right now in the U.S. We're finding out a lot of different things, that people are doing, right? Try not to deviate too far from the conversation about the movie, right? But
yeah.
I mean, there are so many good points, and some of them I really would love to talk to you about again and our listeners about. One of the things that I took away from was, and I heard a couple different variations of this quote that Tony Robbins had in the movie. It was, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what they can do in 2 to 3 decades.
Yes.
I thought that was so impactful because we're so told to be thinking about the now all the time. Think about the now, be in the now. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're planning, you can't plan just in the now. You do have to plan yourself into the future sometimes as well, right? And see yourself being a bigger and better person if you choose to be that bigger and better person in the future as well.
Well, the secret to adulthood is doing something consistently every single day. I think Jerry Seinfeld is the perfect example. He's a near billionaire, if not a billionaire. That blew my mind when I saw that. But you think about Seinfeld reruns and DVD sales and streams and all that kind of stuff, and it begins to make sense. But he focused on that one thing for so long, every day, making a joke and then checking it off in his calendar, making a joke, checking it off his calendar. It's easy to do, easy not to do. It's so the slight edge, right?
Well, part of that too was he also practiced that joke consistently until he got that joke and the tone of the joke and the wording in that joke just the way he wanted it. So when he told that joke to an audience, either on the TV show or in a live audience, he would get the exact reaction he would hope for because of the exact emphasis on every word he had used as well, right? So it was actually a very interesting way of being able to do the same thing routinely, like you're saying, and getting good at it and then going out and doing it too.
Well, true, but the way I interpret it is that, and especially having written 365 songs in a year once, I think part of the thing is you have lots of bad jokes, you have lots of bad songs, you have lots of bad ideas, even if it's something that's a habit and you're doing every single day. So it wasn't a matter of writing an amazing joke every single day. It was just a matter of writing a joke every single day. The act of engaging yourself in that discipline and doing it daily was far more important. I'm sure he took some things from the jokes he generated, but I doubt that he used all of it. It was like a recognition that human beings don't create good things by only doing it once, through much repetition, through creating quantity, and then we can begin to recognize within our work the genius as well as the stupid.
Right. No, you're right on that. I don't think he had a excellent joke every single time, right?
No.
Just like everybody in the crowd, everybody in the crowd at the conference was not being helped in the same way, right?
Or necessarily needed it.
But I think there was something that everybody could take away, right? Not just to use for themselves, but also to use for maybe somebody they know that's going through that similar type of problem, right? So absolutely, he, from what I know about that, I kind of watched a program on Seinfeld and how he kind of came up with the jokes in his process as well, right? So from what I understood,
Right.
yeah, he definitely was writing jokes all the time. And yeah, not every joke was the best joke, but I think that's where that practice came in, and changing some of the words and making those, jokes that weren't as great to be great later, right? So, I mean, these are jokes that he could still have written down that he's never used, but he could use them maybe some other time when the right appropriate time comes as well.
Exactly. But I think the more, I guess, macro topic here is identifying where you're BSing yourself, right? What's holding you back? What's the thing that, where are you lying to yourself and allowing yourself to slip your standards, your beliefs? Where are you being lazy in your life? That's kind of what Tony was helping people see.
Right. Well, and you said it perfectly, right? And one of the things he suggested was, and one of the things I learned from that was, if you find yourself not being true to yourself and being lazy, being lazy, and I put that in quotes because I think everybody who's working doesn't feel like they're being lazy, but it's also maybe not doing what you should be doing, right? It was being accountable. That's one of the things I took, right, from it, is being accountable to yourself, and also telling somebody else as well what you're doing, what your plans are as well, so you can then continue to do that, right? Because I think we all need somebody to lean on when we are going through hard times, right? But we have to first believe in ourselves before, we can start telling the whole world what we're looking to do, right? I mean, it does come with self-confidence as well.
Yeah. And it's so easy to say too sometimes, oh, well, if you just persist through, if you just keep doing the right things, it's a lot harder than it sounds. And I can say that because I'm now kind of in a season where there's various challenges, various difficulties, various problems, maybe sometimes self-induced.
Right.
But when you're in that season, I guess, first of all, it's recognizing it, that you're there. If you don't recognize that you're in that particular season, then you might be compelled to continue down a track of bad behavior. But then that prepares you, like, okay, now that I know that I'm here, I know it's possible that some other challenge is going to come up. And now I have to kind of decide in advance, who am I? What am I going to do in that situation? What's the right thing to do, even though it's hard to do? Because usually that's what we're facing. What's the right thing to do in the face of what's difficult?
Right. You say that, and it makes me think about this quote that I heard a long time ago too, is character is who you are in the dark, or when no one can see you, right? So continue doing the things that you know are the right things to do. It doesn't matter who knows everything about you, who doesn't know anything about you, because you know the most about yourself, right? So if you're out there doing the things that you know you should be doing, if you're on a diet, for example, not cheating on your diet, right? Other people may not see you eat that cookie, but who are you being true to? Right? If you're not true to yourself first, right? Because then if you can't even add simple value to yourself, how do you eventually want to add value to other people if that is part of your goal? And I think as a human being, I think the value should be of most people, if not everybody, to try to add some sort of value to other people's lives, right? And that's just going right back to Tony Robbins, what he said, right? His obsession is his addiction now, because it's his addiction to help people. That's how he wants to add value to people's lives.
It's really the same thing that we look at as hosts of using your power, right? Because we're looking at what would make for good content, what would make us, how do we be good examples to the people that are listening in, and also all those kinds of considerations maybe don't instantly enter our mind, but they're certainly in the back of our mind as we move forward. It's like, well, we can't tell people to be fit if we're not fit. We can't tell people to be more honest if we're telling lies. And so all those kinds of things kind of begin to affect you, and you kind of thinking about it.
No, you're right, and that's the whole concept of who are you in the dark, right? Like,
yes.
When no one can see you, when no one else is around you, who are you really, right? And one of the things I got from him too is like, to know who you are in the dark is to know who you are in your words and in your actions. And I think that's kind of exactly what you're alluding to, right? Like, if you can't, if you talk the way you talk, be yourself. You don't have to be someone else to one group of people and be another person to another group of people, at work or at home or with your friends or whoever, right? When you start doing that, are you really yourself? Do you really know who you are anymore, right? You can't be three people. You should just be one person, right? And if they can't live with that one person, then really, do you need those people in your life? Or the other way, do they need you in their life anymore? Because you're not being yourself. They're only keeping you around perhaps because you're this certain type of person.
It's so true, and I had someone send me some, say they were praying for me and that kind of stuff today, and that's always nice to see. But like part of me goes too, like, well, what are you showing it in your actions? Like, I'm glad that you're saying you're supporting me, but how are you supporting me? Like, I don't want to question anybody's like loyalty or belief in me or like their intention to support, because the way in which they support me is probably going to be different than how I'd imagine somebody would support me. And I think that's part of reconciling that difference is like really important too. But sometimes I do question that when people say things like that.
Well, I think that's just an expectation, right? Like, I think we all have expectations of what we want certain people to be like with us because we're a certain way with them, or how we want a certain situation to turn out, right? I mean, you told me right from the beginning, and I think I mentioned this in another podcast as well. It's like you can write the best article and you expect everybody to read it and you want everybody to learn from it and it's going to be life-changing, and really no one read it, right? But you could write kind of a semi-half-ass article and you can kind of not even market it, not really tell anybody on social media, and it could be your most read article on your website and you didn't even want it to be. It's what people are looking for, right? So if you have those expectations, they can be sometimes very unreal, right? So really having real expectations of what you expect and what you don't expect, and really just, I think, going with the flow, as they say, is sometimes usually the best expectation as well.
That's a really good explanation and interpretation. I like that, Mav.
Thank you.
What else have we got?
Well, there's lots of other points. I got tons written down.
No, let's keep going.
So, I mean, we're going to keep going. So one of the things that he said was, a change happens in a moment, but getting to that moment takes years. What do you think?
Oh gosh, sometimes that is true, right? I think if we're honest with ourselves, we all have a vice or an addiction of some kind, and sometimes confronting that takes so much time, interpreting it, and maybe going deeper into it. I know that some counselors and some psychologists, they say the way that I deal with the past is to not deal with it. I can totally appreciate that viewpoint, but at the same time, to negate your past entirely and say none of that had an effect on who you are today is also incorrect, I think. So, when it comes to, like skeletons in your closets or demons that you're trying to confront, that statement is so true, right? An addiction could be something like, I have a hard time letting go of this person in my life because I've like leaned on them for so long, but like the relationship's not evolving or going anywhere, which might be relevant to somebody that was featured in the documentary too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and it's funny, I'll give you just a quick example of myself, right? Growing up as a kid, we did bad stuff as you probably did too. And I think I've told you this story too. And,
I'm still a kid and I still do bad stuff.
I try not to do bad stuff, but I am definitely still a kid. But they happen, right? But, when we were kids, me and my sister, my parents would punish us for doing bad things. And, their form of punishment necessarily wasn't, orthodox. I mean, my parents would feed us hot sauce and chili peppers because, that was their only way of knowing what they could do with us, because that's all they really knew. They really had no experience, and that was okay, right? But because of them, they're teaching us on how to try to be better, it really didn't help because I got used to eating hot sauce. But, in the big picture, one of the things that it taught me was... And you kind
of like it now, right?
Oh, I love hot sauce. And people that know me know that I can really eat spicy food. They know I enjoy spicy food. But one of the things I learned was about myself with the hot sauce, just kind of bringing it back to this, was that I allowed actually the hot sauce to give me power or have power over myself, because I allowed the hot sauce for people to know about me a little bit more about me, was the hot sauce came at a time of anger. So I was actually mad at my parents. So they'd given me this spicy food. As I grew up and I continued to eat hot sauce, that same anger would be projected back towards the people I love, which were my parents, right? So now I actually only learned this about 4 or 5 months ago about myself, maybe a little longer. But that was a trigger for me, right? So that trigger of hot sauce actually allowed anger to come out. Now I know that about myself, and now I can control that, right? So, but I had to go back into my past to learn where that anger came from. And now I'm a much better person because now I get it. So am I sad that they did that to me? No, I learned something, right? And being able to now grow from it, I can use that example, not only that example or a subset or a certain similar example, to teach other people how their anger within themselves is probably very similar.
Yeah. Parenting is like a tricky topic, and probably something we'll get into a few years later.
Yeah, because none of us got kids right now.
But the whole thing about like a common phrase, like a punishment fits the crime, I would push back on that. I think it's hard to make a punishment fit a crime. And I think it's exactly what you said too. There's a consequence. There's just, it's inevitable. So you do something that you feel you weren't supposed to do, and there's a consequence for it, whether it's feeling guilty, and guilt is like a horrible emotion to harbor, or, something bad happens as a result of you making that particular decision. There's always a consequence. So it's almost like there already is a built-in punishment in doing wrong.
Well, absolutely. And, one of the things that goes right along with that is, going to the story as well, and to exactly what you said, was as I grew up and I found that out about myself, knowing what those consequences were and what they actually did to me, I actually had confronted my parents about that as well, and saying, hey, look, this is what you guys did to me, right? So, and this is how you guys affected me. And I brought it to them, and I was, and that's one of the things that Tony Robbins said in the movie, which, I watched way after I actually confronted my parents. So at least I knew that I had taken the right steps as well based on his teachings, right? So one of the things he says, that even if you're scared, go and talk to those parents or people that put you through that, right? And I mean, it wasn't easy to bring that up to my parents, and they still weren't really willing to listen. But I got it out of my body, right? Because I got it off my mind, I got it off my chest, and now I don't even need to think about it because I let them know where I was coming from moving forward.
And most of all, just getting that deeper understanding of yourself.
Yes.
Now you know why the things are the way they are, because you decided to go deeper into that. And that's the same process that I go through as well. I dig deeper into the past to figure out why I am the way I am.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think one of the things that you said earlier too was, your experience has allowed you to be who you are. So all the good stuff that you've gone through and all the bad stuff that you've gone to have made you who you are today, right? So, you didn't go, because bad things happened to you, you didn't go down a bad path. Because good things happened to you, you didn't necessarily only go down a good path, right? You took that good and bad, learned all about as much as you could about yourself, and took the path that you found was best for you.
So true.
Right?
Absolutely.
So one of the other things that on there was asking yourself tough questions. What do you think about that?
Love it. I think we even had this discussion early on. I guess one of the things we're trying to do with using your power is develop products for people, right? So one of the points that we were kind of examining and looking into was this idea of asking better questions. I think Tony Robbins is perhaps the king of that idea of figuring out what questions you need to ask yourself in order to progress, because that's the quality of the questions that affects our lives. I mean, he even says something to that extent, right? Like that your outcome of your life is impacted by the quality of questions that you ask.
That's right. And, and we've talked about that with sales as well. If you're going to be asking questions, ask a better question, or you're only going to get the right answer you're asking the question to, right? So if you think that, with him, it was, people are asking him questions, he's asking them questions. If he thought that was the actual problem, he would have kind of continued down that same path of asking questions. But he found that wasn't necessarily the questions that he needed to ask, because he felt that there was something else behind there, something deeper that he needed to get into, right? And I think that only just came from experience that he's had over the last almost 30, 40 years.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of those things that I try to do in tough times as well. Like, what are some questions you can ask when things are difficult? Well, I found that who do I need to be right now? It's a good question to ask, because if there's a change in the season, and change always comes in life, then asking yourself who I need to be right now. I mean, you're always yourself, but like what changes, what little shifts, what little tweaks do you need to make to come out of that particular season with flying colors versus burnt out and and discouraged and having a hard time continuing and moving onwards.
Right. And you hit it on the nose, because I know you've watched that movie too. And that's exactly what he says, right? He says, face your problems and deal with it. And I think that's exactly what you're saying to our listeners too, right? Like, if you're going through stuff, and we're all going to go through stuff. So, go through it, learn from it, and deal with it, and move forward from it, right? If you continue to just think, oh man, I'm fat, I'm never going to get skinny, or I'm never going to be healthy, no one's ever going to love me, and you wallow in that forever, how are you going to get out of it exactly? If you're going to leave yourself in that spot, you need to have that power over yourself to get yourself out of that, and then only will other people want to help you as well, right? I mean, I remember a story that I read about this one guy. I think he weighed about 300-400 pounds, wanted to lose weight. So what he did was he went for a walk every day, and he did the same path every single day, and people would see him walking every single day and getting skinnier and skinnier, and people would come out and hand him a glass of water because they knew he needed it, or they'd give him a little energy bar or something, right? And that just kept motivating him to keep doing that route, because people would be like, hey man, good job, you're really doing it, we could see the difference in you, right? But he had to make that change for himself before other people became the cheerleader for him.
Very true. And I think that goes back to exactly what we said earlier about being consistent. Like, in your adult life, if you want to succeed, you keep doing the same things every single day. Now, is a walk going to make you instantly healthier, fitter? No, but compounded over time. You give it a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Pretty soon the weight is coming off, because you've been consistent, you've stayed with it. So that healthy habit has become the thing that the catalyst for a better future for yourself.
That's right. And the couple of the other things some of the things that we went back, that I'm going to go back and that he talked about. The reason he said he swore so much was he wanted to interrupt the chit chat in people's heads.
Yes.
He's like, a lot of people, when they start listening to him talk, they're expecting a certain type of conversation. So the swearing was part of it, was to interrupt that self-talk that people are continually going through, right? So I just got into a couple of my points, and I just kind of saw that there. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there as well.
Self-chat, that's a huge topic you could probably get into in and of itself, because
for sure,
we talk so poorly to ourselves sometimes.
Well, that, and we see it in the media all the time, talking poorly to us as well, right? And we read magazines that are talking poorly to us, telling us to have some sort of certain self-image about ourselves. But yeah, for sure, I think we should totally do a talk on that, which I think is going to be great.
Yeah. We'll definitely get to that.
Awesome. So a couple of the other points, let's go, is don't fall back into old patterns.
I think we all have certain patterns, and it's very true. I think part of that maybe is separating the good patterns from the bad patterns too, right? Because if it's a good pattern, such as walking every day, getting exercise, losing weight, then you actually have a good pattern. So why wouldn't you continue to, let that habit move you forward? But I think, he is talking primarily about old patterns that continue to repeat themselves in a negative way, and that manifest in our lives in a negative way.
No, you're right. And even going back to what you're saying, even if you're going for a walk and you're doing the same route, even that's an old pattern, right? Change the route up. So even things like that, you can definitely do to get yourself out of that. Carry a 5-pound dumbbell one day, carry a 10 pound if you can for that long a period of time, and then don't carry a dumbbell at all. Maybe wear some ankle weights, maybe, listen to different kind of music, right? Just get out of your old pattern, maybe go for a walk, half jog, half walk, half jog, and just kind of switch it up. I think that's kind of what he's saying, even with the idea of falling back into old patterns. You're right. Like if you have a certain person, like you said, you alluded to it earlier as well, right? If you have somebody that you're so connected to that you can't disconnect from, and you're going to continually maybe write the person or call the person, you're falling back in an old pattern that you shouldn't be in. So find ways to get out of that, right? And sometimes cutting off those ties is the best way to get out of an old pattern.
That's what I was going to get to as well. But I also liked your point about input, in the sense that people tend to consume the same things over and over. Is it any wonder that you're the same person today that you were yesterday? You have a DVD collection. Well, interesting thing about a DVD collection, you get into the habit of watching the same shows over and over and over again, and patterns become repeated. The lines, the things that the actors say, maybe even some of the behaviors or style, maybe personal fashion that you're trying to emulate. Now it's like all been dictated by what you've watched in those movies and your DVD collection over and over again.
Right. And I think, social media and music, definitely add to that, especially music, right? I mean, you listen to the radio, it's the same top 40 music and it's the same continuous rotation. I remember,
I try not to listen to the radio.
No, but if you do, right? Even if you go out to the mall, for example, right? There's always some music playing in the background, right? And
that
might
could
not
be like a mall specific playlist even.
Absolutely. But you might be walking down, you're not really hearing the music because it's really light typically, but you have that one song come on and you'll start listening to it and you start hearing it, right? So that song that was so light in the background, now it's prominent and you can actually hear all the words clearly, right? Like I know I was just in Superstore, which we have in Calgary, I was buying some fruits and vegetables, and one of the songs was Gnarls Barkley, Crazy. It came on. I couldn't hear any other music that Superstore was playing until that song came on, which I thought was interesting because as soon as I came on, I started I got a little bit happier. I knew the words for some reason because I listened to the song, I enjoyed it. And I was like, wait a minute, it's that same music that they're playing. But as soon as that song was over, I couldn't hear this music anymore, right? Because maybe I didn't know what the song was. And my brain just said, oh, I don't know it. I'm going to turn it off and let's go back to whatever you were doing, right? So it was just really interesting. I found about how things that impact you over a long period of time that you don't even think about anymore.
Yes. Well, I think if you're a musician, though, you notice. I can't help but notice what music is playing in what environment.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Maybe like developing that ear over time and playing so much music and having so much musical ideas just run through your head constantly. That's maybe why. But you're right. I think in general, you don't always pay attention to it, maybe until a specific song comes on.
Well, and that's it, right? It's just realizing that you even see and know these songs that are coming out of nowhere, right? I mean, and those are the songs that can impact you as well, right? So if you're going to find songs that are going to impact
Subliminal marketing.
Well, exactly. But find songs that are going to be happier for you, right? And don't necessarily listen to songs that are creating negative, right? I remember growing up listening to a lot of hip hop in the 90s, right? And a lot of it was gangster rap. A lot of it is, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to sell you drugs, I'm going to beat you up, I fucked your wife, whatever, right? I mean, these are the things that were being talked about. How could you not grow up and want to emulate what you're seeing, because you see this lifestyle that these people are talking about and supposedly living, and then thinking, hey, I want to do what these guys are doing. So it's hard not to want to be like that, right? Especially when you're 16 and you're growing up and all your buddies are kind of listening to the same music as well, and and there's drug references in there, and then you want to try those same drugs that these guys are doing too, right? I mean, The Chronic, who doesn't want to listen to Dr. Dre and then be influenced by that, and Snoop Dogg back then in 91, in 92, 93, right? When these songs and albums come out, that's the kind of the lifestyle that they're portraying that they're living, and they want you to live as well, right? So, or not maybe you to live, but they're influencing the way you will live, I guess.
Well, there definitely are a lot of stimulants. Like I came back to Canada in grade 8. Well, I was just finishing up grade 8 from living in Japan. So my first full year in Canada was in grade 9, or in school, first full year in school. There are so many stimulants, right? First of all, you have kind of your peer group and your classmates, and maybe the people that you wish you could be friends with, the people that you are friends with. And then the music, like you said, might be impacting your style, the way you think. I think for me too, like it played into fear, right? Okay, what if I do get beat up by one of these rappers one day? Like those kinds of things. Not like we would ever meet each other necessarily, but those kinds of thoughts can definitely occur to you when you're still in your development phase.
Right. So just moving right along. So a couple of things that I liked as well was, do you think, what do you think is the best thing for you, right? And I thought, allowing yourself to feel pain and hurt, sometimes that's what we need.
Yes. So sometimes pausing and letting the pain or the fear sink in. I know that's something that is hard to do. A lot of people will turn to alcohol or drugs or some other way of numbing out their feelings instead of feeling them. So I definitely remember hearing that and reading that before. And, I think there can be some insights that come out of that. Maybe it will help you cope in a way that you never thought possible before. Or maybe it's just challenging your beliefs and the beliefs that actually need to be challenged. And because they are being challenged, you're hurt in the process. But just knowing that there will come an end to that season, because everything is a season. It doesn't last forever. So looking ahead and seeing what the results of maybe tearing down that belief could be.
Right. And, I think just dealing with the pain is really being honest with yourself. Right. That's it really is, because a lot of people hide that pain inside and they don't tell anybody, and they just let that anger build up over time, and they just allow it to. Right. I mean, if you're able to just talk to somebody about it, that's the reason they have like psychologists for, and to go talk to somebody when you're dealing with stuff. Right. Because some people need it. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. But even your good friends can be that for you as well. Right. As long as you trust them and you know that they're not going to just spread your business to every single person in the world. Right? It's just finding that one right person that you can connect to tell them your story, and then they can help you maybe just listen to what you have to say, right? And if you end up crying because that's the emotion you feel on the inside, that's okay too, right? Realize that, because I know as a man, sometimes it's seen that crying is not a good thing, right? How are you going to be a masculine man and defend the world and defend your family if you cry, right? These are the things that you hear and you grow up, believing, because that's what you see in social media or in the media at that time. Now more sometimes in social media, just like you were saying too, right? Being that 6-foot guy and you got nothing but muscles, that's kind of what we're seen to see. And you say, well, that guy probably doesn't cry because he works out and he's huge and his life is all put together, right? But we're not all like that. And sometimes being real with yourself is finding that emotional side of yourself as well, right? It's not easy, but if you allow yourself to find it, you don't have to always live there, but you can know that it is there, and if you ever need to tap into it, you can.
Yeah, I definitely have to push back on that idea, because a real man isn't somebody who holds it all in. A real man is somebody who's able to express himself in front of anybody. Don't you think?
Absolutely.
It's much harder to express yourself in front of everybody, even if you're feeling sad or angry or depressed, than it is to hold it in. It's easy to hold it in. And if you hold it in, that could lead to suicide. That could lead to drug use, alcohol use, other forms of abuse that aren't healthy expressions of what you're actually feeling.
Right. Well, I know, our parents' generation, for example, they were really taught to hold it in, right? They were taught, guys don't do this. Guys work in the fields, in the farmer fields, and they go to do this, and they're these soldiers. They're the army for their family, right? And how can you feel that you can be any less than what you're being told you should be if you don't allow yourself that feeling, right? So you hold it in. I mean, there's things like, you hear about stories about people that went to war, World War I, World War II, and they don't talk about these stories. They don't want to talk about the pains that they saw, right? They're holding this in now as well, right? For the rest of their lives sometimes, and they might only just tell one person just to tell somebody, right? But I think if we know about the stories that these people went through, we can relate to their pain, right? Maybe not of war, but at least maybe it's the things that they went through, because they can really help us see how what we're going through is really nothing compared to what they went through into trench warfare potentially, right?
Well, part of that idea that I think I want to challenge a little bit is your biggest challenge, Maveen, might be completely different than what somebody else. Like, someone might totally fear war, but you, Maveen, are brave and excited and courageous, and you love war. Like, I'm not saying that that's true. I'm just saying, like, there could be that difference. And your biggest fear would be encountering a snake. So you encounter a snake while you're in trenches fighting a battle, and your fear manifests in a different way. So the scariest thing for me is not the scariest thing for you. That the toughest thing to overcome for me is not the toughest thing to overcome for you. If that were the case, we wouldn't really need each other.
No, that's true. But the biggest thing that you can take from it is that whatever you're afraid of, I may or may not be afraid of it. But even if I know what you're afraid of, that sharing of your pain and what you're scared of and you're afraid of not only allows you to be free, because that actually sets you free when you express it. It allows me to understand who you are as a human being and as a person. It actually makes our relationship a lot better and tighter because now I understand who you are as a person. If I'm a good person, I'll actually understand who you are and I'll help you grow from that as well, right? Not take advantage of it, right? So I personally feel there's a great need for people to tell more of what they're scared of and what they are afraid of, because if you tell people, that will allow you to grow from where you are, deal with your past, and move forward the direction you hopefully want to go.
I agree with that.
Perfect. And I got nothing else on that. All right.
Great.
So the next thing I got out of there was do the things you need to do in the now so you can then move forward after dealing with it in the moment. And it kind of works with what we were just kind of talking about anyways, is sharing your pains. It was kind of the same point, but a lot of it was dealing with the things today, right? If you know you need to deal with it today, that pain, deal with it today. How do you feel about that?
It's challenging. I think for a lot of people who are sensitive, emotional, I know that a lot of artists are that way. I know that I'm that way. I'm highly intuitive and highly emotional. Sometimes you don't know the source of the emotion, even if it is within or something you've experienced with the past, or if it's actually somebody else that's affecting you. And so first of all, identification, maybe Tony Robbins has a specific method for cutting through that and getting to the core of it, but I don't know what that is. So me personally, that could be hard. Should emotions be dealt with sooner rather than later? I agree. I think there's a lot of people that would hold their emotions in, like at a funeral or something like that. They don't cry, they don't express, they don't emote in any way, and I think those people end up harboring that for a long time to come because they didn't take that moment to grieve that loss. But if you grieve that loss, even though it might in the moment appear quote unquote weaker, in the long run will allow you to move forward and appreciate that person's life more than you continue to mourn their death for the rest of your life.
Right. And, I think the idea of being able to deal with something in the now, you can only deal with it in the now if you know what it is that you need to deal with, right?
Identification.
So, yeah, until you figure that out, it may take you 6 years, 6 months, 6 days, or 6 minutes to figure out what was bothering you. But until you actually sit down with yourself with a pen and paper, not a computer, a pen and paper, write it down and start writing things down that you think that are bugging you. Yeah, exactly. Then can you only go back to it, look at it, and say, you know what, that was actually bothering me. Let's figure out what it is, right? I mean, there are different things that people have done to figure out what's bothering them. I know I've had conversations with friends of mine, and they're gonna eat these mushrooms, right? The magic mushrooms. And I said, why are you eating these magic mushrooms for? Why can't you just sit down and meditate on the problem, right? And just kind of maybe figure out that way and sit with yourself. The answer was a great answer. He said, look, I can take 3 months or 6 months to meditate and figure out the problem, or I can eat just the right amount of mushrooms. Not that I condone any of it or don't condone it. It's really up to the person. It's up to them. I can't tell you what to do with yourself. But he said, within a 2 hour, 1 hour period, he was actually able to work through everything that he needed to do, what the problem was, and then get to that, right? So, I mean, for him, it was valuable, but for people who don't know how to use that technique, it's not going to be very valuable. Now you're just doing drugs.
That's a good point.
Right. So, I mean, not that I don't think Tony Robbins would say, hey, do drugs to figure stuff out. I mean, we all cope and look for ways from our own experiences, our own knowledge bases, our friends' knowledge bases, books, whatever we come in contact with, we use those things, right? We also use our own experiences as part of our largest knowledge base, and other people's experiences, I think, as a second knowledge base source as well, right? So,
And
thoughts?
I would be inclined to believe that drug use would probably prohibit your brain from coming to the solution sooner, unless it just numbs it instead. Like I said earlier, drugs, alcohol, other behaviors, gambling can numb what you think is the issue instead of actually dealing with it head first. So that's just a thought, but I believe it would numb your senses and make you unable to deal with the situation.
Right. Well, there are two thoughts on it, and neither one is wrong or right. What I will say is, I think if you're in the right headspace before doing it, I think alcohol doesn't help you deal with problems. I 100% agree with you on that. I think that can be an enabling worse problems down the road. Not saying that mushrooms was a good or bad thing, but for him, he knew how to use them. He knew how he was going to use them. He wasn't using them to party or get high or have a hallucination, right? He was really focused, right? So, there's a lot of different training, even in the 60s and 70s, where a lot of people were doing a lot of drugs and experimenting and really trying to reach a higher level of consciousness. Now, were they able to get to that? Some people probably were. Some people probably weren't able to, right? I think if you have the right mindset going into it, maybe having people there to help you guide you through that process as well can be helpful. It's kind of like when you go into hypnosis almost, I think, right? You need that guide, right? But if you're just there trying to get high, that's a different story. I do not think it's going to work.
Okay. No, yeah. You've given me food for thought there, because I have heard of things such as manifesting your desires through sex. Don't ask me how it works. I don't really know.
There you go.
I think I might have watched a documentary on it once.
Fair.
But, people do talk about that kind of thing too. So maybe with drugs, there is some benefit in that sense. You could somehow manifest a solution through drugs.
Right. Well, I know not that this is a topic on drugs, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but
no. Well,
we can have that conversation.
Is, though, in a way, right?
It is. And but there's a lot of musicians, for example, that do drugs and put out great music, right? Because they're channeling that that place that they were once they do the drug to get into a place of being creative. Now, there's different things. Now, again, there's getting high, and then there's being creative to find solutions or make music or whatnot, right? So I think it really depends on the space you're in, what mindset you're in, and the behavior you're going to go into, right? Now, I'm not saying that you should do them or don't do them. I think as long as you know who you are and why you're doing something, then do what you have to do, right? I can't tell people it's a good or a bad thing. It's the decision they have to make for themselves, right? I make my own decisions about drinking or drugs. I think you make your own decisions on drinking and drugs, and I think our listeners as well, right? So I know this is it's about using your power, and it's understanding what drugs do, right? Even pharmaceuticals. I know we've had this conversation before. The way pharmaceuticals are, they're also a drug, right? So they can
absolutely they're a drug.
You'll see stuff that says don't drive. It impairs you, right? So that if you can't drive on a certain drug, that means it's probably got a very similar reaction to maybe a drug that you can't necessarily get your hands on legally, such as pharmaceuticals, right? So, there are different things and there are different agendas we've talked about as well. Again, not really on this topic, but there are these things.
Absolutely, there are, and you're right. We can't affect what people necessarily how they choose to deal with the situation. I think certain amount of soberness, however that soberness is achieved to come to a conclusion about the problem or the issue that you're going through, is needed, though.
Yeah, no, for sure, right? And like I've always used walking in nature as a way to find solutions to my issues and problems. I've also used music. I've also used meditation. I've used just closing my eyes and just laying there and just really allowing my brain to wander and just kind of see where it takes itself, right? And try not to control the thought itself. And if I see myself trying to control the thought, see it, and then allow myself to go right back down that path again and just see where it takes me, right? And sometimes it'll take you into the dark places you don't want to go. And I think that's kind of what Tony Robbins is really saying, is right? Go into those dark places that you're afraid to go, and then deal with the problems that you just have not dealt with, because either one, you can't see what those problems are, or you won't allow yourself to see what the actual problems are.
I hear that. I hear
Right.
that. Yeah.
So one of the other things, and I guess that goes along with one of the things he said, was really getting out of your own head. Right. So that really goes with that idea. And then again, one of the things that I liked what he said was, what questions am I thinking of today that are going to change my life tomorrow?
Yes, and I think that still ties right back in with what was said earlier about asking the right questions too. But you're right. So maybe part of that question asking process is realizing that there is an end destination or goal or objective that you're working towards, and then asking the right questions about that specific end destination as opposed to anybody else's, or as opposed to not having an end destination in mind at all.
Yes. Would you say, David, it's kind of like hacking your way to the, how hacking nowadays is like not hacking as in what computer guys do. I think it's the idea of, I might be using the wrong word, I apologize, but it's, if you know what your final goal is going to be, is working your way from your goal all the way back to the point where you are today and asking yourself questions throughout that process to get to your goal. I think that's what you're trying to say. Is that right?
Well, I like that, like shortcuts, but really I like Shane Snow's smart cuts better, making smart decisions about the shortcuts you're taking, because you take any shortcut and that could actually end up hurting your chances of getting to where you want to go. But you're right, hacking would be like, cutting off a certain amount of time of your work that you're doing, so thereby achieving better results or productivity. Maybe you could automate a process that takes you 20 minutes and reduce it down to 0. Well, now you have 20 minutes back. So that kind of thing can be valuable.
Absolutely. And a couple of different things that just say what you just said in a different way that Tony Robbins said it was. He said, when you actually take that time, you're now going to start designing the life you want to create a better life for yourself, right? So that was one of the other things I took away, exactly what you just said, I think. Just Tony Robbins said it slightly different, but I mean, that's a huge point.
That's great.
Right. So kind of where are we now?
We're about an hour in at this point in this particular show.
Awesome. So I think it's probably about the time to wrap up. So what are some of your final thoughts? And I'll kind of give you some of mine.
Final thoughts. Well, obviously, Tony Robbins is a very smart guy. He's studied psychology, according to his own words. He's studied probably thousands of books, if not tens of thousands of books. He's been doing these seminars and conferences for a long time. He's published many books. He's published many, many resources on the topic of self-help and personal development. But I think part of what I Am Not Your Guru offers is this experience that's somewhat removed from all of that. It helps you see the reality of who Tony Robbins is, what he does, and what his audience gets from those particular conferences. And many say the same thing. I think, Ellen's had so many celebrities on her show say, yeah, I went to Tony Robbins. I couldn't believe what happened. But I never wanted to go. It's not my kind of thing. Yeah, well, you don't really know what's your kind of thing unless you do it. And that's particularly true with a self-help topic.
Right. One of the things I do love about this movie was the title itself. I Am Not Your Guru. I think the idea that he was trying to really drive to people was, he is not in charge of you. You are in charge of yourself, and you are your own personal guru, right? So there's no one else can be that for you except for you, right? Until you can deal with it and then get other people to help you with that guru-ness within yourself, right? So a couple of big number things I took out of it was being honest with yourself. That was the one thing I took out of the movie. If you don't know what to change, find little things that are bothering you and start there. A couple different things. A lot of people, he said, deal with the surface issues and never really deal with the problems. Right. Something I really enjoyed what he said. One of the lines he talked about when he was talking about relationships was, rejection creates obsession. I thought that was an interesting line to what he said there too, right? I mean, I can understand that, things that we talked about as well, right? When you can't get rid of that ex in your life or that person in your life because you feel rejected or you feel they will be rejected, right? And then that almost becomes an obsession of yours and that you're not really dealing with the problem. I thought that was really exceptional what he said.
Very insightful.
And one of the things that he portrayed in that movie, and I think he portrays in his whole life, is this sense of high energy. That was one thing I really took away from that was, if you're low energy and really not, bringing that level of confidence within yourself, people see that and people will say, oh, well, if this guy's not excited, how can I get excited about what he's saying, right? So this idea of having high energy and, you watch the movie, the guy's jumping on trampolines and stuff just to get his energy levels up and continue and keep that high the whole time.
There's actually a lot of science behind rebounders. Everybody should own a rebounder if it's possible. They have the space and the budget. It's just a little trampoline. You bounce on it 10 minutes every day. Feel incredible.
Right on. Cool. And with that...
Yeah, we're just about done. I actually just want to make one comment about the whole guru thing too. I think part of it is people now beginning to have a negative association with that word. It used to be kind of like a positive word in the early days of the internet, but now we have everybody calling themselves a, website designer guru or like a personal development ninja, and like it's just cheesy. That's my opinion. You can think whatever you will, but I think it's kind of surpassed that point of being cool and interesting.
Right. And, I want to just kind of add to that too, if you don't mind as well, David.
Sure.
The idea of guru, I think, really does come from a religious point and a spiritual point of view. The idea of guru in business now, I think, is that idea has been brought into it as someone that's knowledgeable. I think that's all guru really means. So what he's really saying is, I am not the most knowledgeable person about you. You are the most knowledgeable person about yourself.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring a slightly different perspective to that, but I don't disagree with that point.
No.
Cool. Well, this has been Using Your Power. Thanks so much for listening. We look forward to seeing and answering your comments.
Awesome. Thank you.